Good morning, everyone. Thank you guys for coming to our last meeting for 2023. Challenging year moving forward. We always have a talk at the end of the year, which is a little different from our normal stats and medicine per se. But this talk that's going to be given by Sundeep is relevant to us in the context and environment and situation that we're sitting in. Sundeep is an endocrinologist. He said I must make a long story. All I can tell you is not many private guys that leave the place and come back to teach. He's out over 10 years. How many years, Sundeep?
13 years.
13 years. And he has not left the department. He still loves teaching students. And it's a refreshing thing to see someone who's committed to the student well-being and teaching. His remarkable thing is he's picked up weight since he took that photo of himself. He's a very calm person. And even in the face of chaos, there's calmness with him. And I think that's the best way to describe him. In the face of chaos, there's calmness. And when you're around him, you somehow be calm because he just doesn't take any of that in. And I've learned a lot from him. He doesn't realize that. And that's one of the qualities of being a good doctor, is calmness in the face of chaos. That's when you're doing a resus, when you're having patients and families that are all over us on our heads, management on our heads. It's to think of Mr. Calmness in the face of chaos. Thank you, guys. Thank you, Sundeep.
Excellent. Well, good morning, friends. As Adam said, a slightly different talk. There's no p-values, there's no hazard ratios, there's no relative and absolute risk in this talk. He asked me to do something different for you guys, so I called it the lost art of medicine. Those who are lost, from talking to Jared here, it seems many at the moment, need to be found. So I'm going to go into this talk. It's a very philosophical talk, so just sit back, relax, and it's here for your contemplation. I'm not even going to reach a conclusion. If I can get you to just stir the perception juices in your mind by the end of this talk, then I've succeeded. Now, lost, what does it mean? You know, you've lost something, it means there's something you should have that you don't have anymore, you know, spent, wasted. The word lost was originally used in ancient history to denote something or someone that is spiritually ruined. And that's the essence of my talk, something that we don't talk about in medicine today as something more than just all our terrestrial undertakings. What is art? Every day you come out here and you learn science, all these stats and evidence-based medicine. And like any AI algorithm, you're being trained to apply those facts. But that's just intelligence. Art is something more. It's a skill. It's a thinking mechanism. It's a manner or mode of doing something, which is a human prerogative. And when you tap into that, you start becoming more fully human. And the point will become more clear as I go. And then there's medicine. Medicine is not just medicine. I mean, today's approach is some guy with an idea gets taken up by a pharma company. He does some research, finds a molecule, do some trials, and then the medicine comes to market and we treat our patients. That's not medicine, right? The very word health, holistic, this holistic feeling we're looking for. All those words are of the same stock. Holy, whole, health. And I'm going to allude to that a lot during this talk. So that's the sort of theme, and I want you to tune into that frequency. There's a lot of Eastern philosophy in this talk, and particularly fond of China, Japan, and India in terms of finding solutions to our current maladies. This quote here: men honor what lies within the sphere of their knowledge, but do not realize how dependent they are on what lies beyond it. Very important thing. Think about what lies beyond it. See, there's these multitudinous laws governing the world. got the law of gravity, magnetism, electricity, physiology, psychology, laws that are so precise. Gravity, 32 feet per second, 9.8 meters per second. It's so precise that it was off by even a decimal, this universe would not exist. So wherever there's perfection and order, something ordained, there has to be an ordainer. I'm not talking about you guys sitting here and imagining a man in the sky controlling everything. Because you guys are intelligent, scientific minds. You have a perception that where there's a shoemaker, there's got to be a shoemaker. It's a law you can posit from how we understand science. And science is a law of cause and effect. So we're seeing all these effects and they're so precise. Look at, for example, a country like Singapore. It was a malaria-infested swamp. Now it's one of the most successful countries on the planet in terms of their money they have. I don't understand GTB and all of these things, but they have a surplus of cash and a good quality of life. Now, that kind of perfection can only come if there's some ordainer. And if you read about Lee Kuan Yew, the late Prime Minister of Singapore, he was quite a magnificent leader in terms of his intellectual prowess and understanding of how to govern, what to do, and they were successful. So if you look at this cosmos, there's a perfection in it. What's that ordainer? You have to have this question. And I think today we've gotten bogged down with the material science so much. There isn't this awareness. You don't have to know it. You have to be cognizant of it. Because without it, there's no humility. And we can get into a bit of trouble. Now, in the broadcast that Jared sent out, he mentioned that I'm a student of Vedanta. And I just thought, because at the end, everybody asks, and this is not the crux of the talk. About 13 years ago, when I left here and got into a bit of private practice, because I had to leave, it wasn't by choice. No course, right? So, but there were questions. I mean, all of you, some of you are very young in your career. You'll come to these questions like, what's the point? Where's all of this going? And I had these questions, so I started investigating. And you've all heard this old adage, when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. And I happened to walk into a talk at WITS main campus by my current teacher and guru, who was a philosopher from India. He had given a talk there, 1 hour free talk. You had a free talk at WITS, you go and attend, And it was called Fall of the Human Intellect. And I met this man and I flew to India because I was so impressed with him and started questioning things. And he introduced me to the subject matter of Vedanta, which is a philosophy that's almost 10,000 years old, written by sages in the valleys of the Himalayas. There's no authorship to this knowledge system. And Vedanta is a Sanskrit word made up of 2 parts. Veda simply means knowledge, and Anta means end of or culmination of. Now, they are the primeval source of knowledge, but knowledge of a different type. They've been classified into 4 segments, the Rig, Sama, Yaju, and Atharvana Vedas, and they form the end component. The Upanishads are an ancient scripture which deal with the highest thought that the human intellect is capable of. In fact, in some scripture, it's translated as the knowledge knowing which everything is known. So here we go and study every section of science, whether it's physics, chemistry, medicine, and even in medicine, there's knowledge of things. But what is knowledge in itself? This is what this subject matter deals with. And I found this very fascinating. It's a very different cognitive approach to understanding life. And it's not a religious pursuit, this is pure philosophy, science of life. But you will see aspects of this knowledge infused into every religion. It's very interesting when you listen to the words of Christ, or the Prophet Mahomed, peace be upon him, or Buddha, or any of the greats that have achieved this realization of moksha, or liberation, or nirvana that everybody seeks. You'll notice in their words this knowledge weaved in. So religion, if anything, is an iota of this knowledge mixed with some ritual to get you to the knowledge. The problem is today we all attach to the rituals. We've not contemplated the philosophy. So that's just a little bit on Vedanta. And then they'll say, well, why do you want to study all this ancient stuff? And there's a tendency for us to associate the word ancient with primitive. You see, primitive is something unsophisticated, not relevant for today. It's old, right? But ancient does not mean primitive. You see, you've got to disconnect that association. because I found ancient knowledge way more useful in modern times than modern knowledge, actually. And modernity does not mean evolution per se. Because we have so much technology and science, there's not equal progress or evolution. I'll make that point in another slide that's coming up. So here I just want you to also maybe clear the perception. You see, there are certain eternal truths of life that are not compromisable. Those laws will be relevant 10,000 years ago, they're relevant today, and they'll be relevant 10,000 years from now. Problem is, when the intellect falls, different from intelligence, we're not cognizant of these laws. Our minds take over with stress and agitation, and we find ourselves in the state we're in. That's why you see in every generation, there's a master that realizes this truth and tries to raise humanity with knowledge. But even they get crucified ultimately, because egos are so strong, they can't take high knowledge. It's very interesting. And you see it playing out in the world today, where there's mass ego. You're seeing this appearance or rise of this cancel culture. I know, there's no discussion, there's no reason, there's no logic. You're seeing it in the world. It's an extreme form of liberal ego we need to be careful about. So there's a point to be made here about ancient versus modern. And I just want you to know that I'm in good company here studying these ancient things. If you look at some of the greatest scientists who have been able to cognize some of the advancements in science. So the Vedic sciences that I study will not teach you particle physics or quantum physics or chemistry and that sort of thing. That's not it. But it expands your cognitive ability to be able to see more, you see. So Erwin Schrödinger, for those of you that are into physics, he was one of the master founders of quantum physics, along with Werner Heisenberg and Niels Bohr and all these chaps. They're a group. If you watched the movie Oppenheimer recently, right? Oppenheimer himself was a reader of the Vedas and Sanskrit texts. So he used to regularly, Erwin Schrödinger used to regularly go into the mountains, leave his wife behind and take a mistress with him, right? And after he did his business with the mistress, exactly, right? It was absolutely essential for him to get to, because his mind is agitated and the desire is not satisfied. He couldn't think, right? So, and he would take pearls actually to shut his ears so the sound wouldn't disturb him in the mountains. So after his business was done, he shut his ears and he would contemplate these truths. And the ideas of quantum physics started becoming clear to him. In fact, quantum physics is as high as we can get in science today, and understanding what Vedanta is actually about in terms of observe, what is reality, etc. So it's very interesting. And even the Upanishads, Niels Bohr, I remember him as the guy who developed electron theory, you know. But how he perceived it was going to study these Eastern concepts. And very interesting, if you read further into it, Henry David Thoreau, Ralph Waldo Emerson, the great philosophers of Germany, Arthur Schopenhauer, they were all readers of the Upanishads and Vedas. And how they got to it is an interesting history. So when the British colonialists started their business in India, I'm being middle line about it, right? India was already decimated by 700 years of Mughal rule. But the knowledge systems had been quite destroyed. But the two chaps, Warren Hastings and Max Muller, were very interested in these knowledge systems, and they were pushing the translation of these texts. And once they got translated, they saw the power of these texts. And this is where these European scholars started reading them, and the knowledge makes its way to Boston. In fact, there's a group called the Boston Brahmins, and this is why Boston is a very academic education center. Harvard is there, everything is there. You find the great philosophers come from that area. So they've all touched on this knowledge in some way, and it expands their individual fragrance. If you're a poet, your poetry becomes amplified. If you're a scientist, all that science just pours out of you. So the Vedas don't tell you what to do or what to become, but it's that missing link in helping you see clearly with the expanded cognitive system. And I can go on talking about the history of this for a long time, but I'm just making a point that in studying ancient things, you're in good company. Now, the art of medicine, said by Galen, Greek philosopher, art consists of three things, right? When we're dealing with patients, there's the disease, which is the process of pathophysiology. So there's a science to it, right? And that disease also has come about due to some aberration. Okay, it's not wrong in its essence, actually. When you start becoming more objective, you see things as they are. In fact, they say disease is sometimes a pointer to providence. It's when we're feeling discomfort that we start introspecting about our lives, isn't it? And there's a question even in philosophy and ethics and stuff. Are we too quick sometimes to treat without allowing the patient to undergo some introspection into the causality? Something in their lives can change for the better. And in my field, I see that a lot with non-communicable diseases. We're treating diabetes and obesity and that sort of thing. And with the rise of, I'm sure you've all heard, GLP-1 analogs and social media punting it everywhere. Everybody's just using drugs quickly now. But is there any introspection how we can do things better? We take that away if we're too quick. And then there's the patient, who's the person. And the etymology of the word patient actually comes from Latin. It means to suffer for a while for a positive outcome. So when your wife or husband tells you to be patient, what are they saying? Suffer, right? Adam. And then there's the physician. Who's the physician? It's the doctor. Doctor comes from Latin, docere. You're not the healer. The healing forces are there. We don't discover new things. We only, through our scientific endeavor, describe what's already there. We get excited by new discoveries, but we're not humble enough to say, actually, the laws are already there. I've just now understood how they're working. The physician is the doctor. Docere means to teach or to guide. So the physician has to be the servant, not the doer of the art. And art is translated here as art, but in the original text, it's nature. Nature is in and of itself, right? So what is nature? It's all these precision, these laws that are so precisely being played out. And when the patient is suffering, they're out of alignment with those laws, you see. So the doctor is the student of that nature, what you guys are doing here with reverence. And your job is then to teach patients how to get in alignment with those laws. And of course, we can't forego our intellect, Galileo said. So we've developed technology and science and tools to assist them along the way. But those are not the goal. They're like crutches until you rehabilitate the broken leg, isn't it? So all our medicine today, we must think about it like that. Otherwise, we create dependency, lack of self-sufficiency in patients. And I think this is an important quote to remember, right? So I know this type of slide can be argued. It's not based on any data, but it's just based on reading and common sense. That our scientific knowledge appears to be improving. Intelligence is growing. There's so much information out there. In fact, today there's so much information that almost feels like all the knowledge we have is like gold on a mule's back. Of what value is it? In fact, I think AI and stuff is an expansion that's necessary because we got so much information to process that we can't keep up. I look at our medical students today and they said, Doc, there's so much to get through, factual data. I don't think it's possible to know everything. And the minute you know something, there's more data that you got to learn, isn't it? So what type of doctors are we going to train? Are we going to train doctors that know facts or doctors that are able to critically think? Because despite all of this improving, I mean, sure, people will quote, oh, we've brought TB rates down here and then HIV rates down here and there. But in general, if you watch the news, if you talk to people, I mean, this is what I see in my practice: depression, dejection, divorce. Everyone's in debt, right? And then as we treat one disease and another one rises, now it's non-communicable. And then you look at the articles in the newspapers, we have a mental health crisis in the world at the moment, right? The very thing the human is supposed to manage, which is the mind, we can't do, right? My French is very poor, but they call it chef d'oeuvre. The masterpiece of creation or evolution is the human, the apex, and we can't manage. Animals eat, sleep, procreate, find shelter, protect themselves. No stress workshops, no work-life balance seminars, right? You see, no overweight, no underweight, right? And then the human, which is at the pinnacle, we've got all these issues. So we've got to ask the question. See, nobody's researching that despite all of this, how come we're not getting it right? You see, if we've evolved so much, this world should be a utopia right now. Elon Musk is attaching his Hot Wheels to skyrockets and shooting it into the sky. and we're saying that's advancement. What do we mean by that, So is scientific knowledge making us healthier, happier, and content? And on this word on happy and content, why do we do what we do every day? Why do you come to work? Why do you go away on weekends? Why do you eat what you eat? Why do you wear what you wear? Because at the end goal, nobody wants to wake up every morning and want to be anxious, stressed, depressed, and critical. Yet all of us experience this every day. So the desire for contentment is not wrong. It is the goal of human life. But there's a question about the means to this goal, which we're not contemplating. So science, as I said, is the intellectual and practical activity encompassing systematic study of structure and behavior of the physical natural world. So put simply, we've got 5 senses with which we can examine the outer world. But those 5 senses perceive the world according to the way humans do. The ant's world is very different from an elephant's world. We now know the fish in the depths of the ocean see a different spectrum of light and that sort of thing. So what is that world we observe is according to that limited sensory system, right? But very interesting, science can also measure your body. So you start getting, if you talk like this, into a question of what is the observer and what is the observed? Because if I can measure the body, then what is I? If I say this is my iPad, my means possessed. The iPad is possessed, I'm the possessor. So when you say my body, my eyes, who is the possessor and what is the possessed? You see, the body is a physical structure which can be examined by senses and tools. Of course, the expansion of science into the outer world is through expanding the senses through equipment, microscopes, telescopes, sonography, etc. It is extension of the senses, isn't it? So what are we measuring with science? Everything external. But when I talk like that, there's still something observing, something inner that precedes the senses. This is where philosophy comes in. It's very interesting because our tools cannot measure that inner principle, call it that, you see, that observer, right? Even mind, done seminars with psychiatrists, they don't know what mind is. Mind is not brain, it's not neurochemistry. Now, if you look at science at the microcosm, 2010, I don't know if you remember, the Higgs boson particle, right? They say we're going to find the God particle that will know everything. So when I was in high school, which is a very long time ago, atom was the smallest particle of nature that we knew. And we said, there's more, protons, electrons, blah, blah, and then quarks and whatever. Then we said Higgs boson. And we found the Higgs boson and said, oh crap, there's more to find. You see, now there's all sorts of muons and I don't know what's going on, right? But the point is that microcosm, the science, not morons, I said muons, right? The science at the microcosm seems to go ad infinitum. It seems like the minute you discover something, there's something more to discover, right? So the particulate nature of the world, the science seems ad infinitum, right? And then you go to the macrocosm, it also seems ad infinitum. Where's the boundary of the universe? You see, it seems like everything has this infinite concept in it, right? Galaxies, now black holes, and then you can get to the event horizon of the black hole, but beyond that, our science doesn't apply. It baffles the mind, isn't it? So time is eternal, space is all-pervading, and causation, it's your father's first father. Where did everything start? Is infinite. So all-pervading, eternal, infinite. These concepts of something very undescribable seem to be infused into the cosmos, into the universe. And that question, what else do we use these words to describe? Infinite, all-pervading. How many of you are very religious, have read religious books? Do we not use those words to describe God? Omnipotent, omniscient. So it seems the properties that describe an unknowable entity are infused into the universe, in everything we do. Even Einstein got to a point where he said, I need that measurement point beyond the known reality. Then things will make sense. Something we're missing, you see. So that's where philosophy comes in, this missing thing. Now, what's lost, I think, in modern times is the study of the fundamental nature of knowledge, reality, and existence. You're a lover of wisdom, right? And that is the human thing. We are the only species capable of a vertical dimension of knowledge. From a very young age, your children, a 6 months old, 1 year old, they're curious that I want to know, what is that? Unfortunately, we stifle them with do's and don'ts, and we don't allow that curiosity to expand. So we give them patterns. Oh, you're born, you must go to school, you must wear this outfit and get a badge and be a prefect and finish matric and then find a partner and get married and have children and then repeat the cycle of misery and stress and disaster. Right? That's what we do. I'm not saying any of that is wrong. I'm just saying, do we think and do, and do we allow that questioning to happen? I think it's missing today. And that's what makes a person spiritual. You see, unfortunately, also religion and spirituality have got a negative connotation today due to over-attachment and ritualization, militarism, fanaticism, and etc. Spirituality simply means a human that navigates the terrestrial life, the lower path, while contemplating this transcendental question. And whatever you do, you can be a businessman, a carpenter, a plumber, scientist, an academic doctor, but somewhere in there, there's this constant thought, you see, and that investigation completes us more. So what is knowledge in the way I'm talking about it? It's not knowledge of things, knowledge of obstetrics, knowledge of infectious diseases. You see, if I say, are you conscious, Brett, right? Are you conscious? Brett's going to say, of what? Right? Make sense? So anything I say, are you conscious? It's always of something. But what is consciousness in itself prior to of? You see, what is knowledge in and of itself? If I ask any of you if you know my name, most of you would know it by now. And you'll be certain that you know it. But if I asked you my great-grandfather's name, you're certain that you do not know it. So that knowledge by which you're certain of what you know and you're certain of what you do not know, that Gnostic principle is through knowledge. It's the light of wisdom. To tap into that with Vedanta, what we learn is not just direct perception, which is a modern evidence-based medicine, but we use inference. You see, something that cannot be described, you can't use words to describe it, but you can infer. Where there's smoke, it's most likely fire. Where there's these concepts of infinity, all-pervading eternity, there must be an underlying, please come in, unchanging concept there. You see, change is only perceptible when it's happening against a changeless object. If you've got a fixed cloud in the sky and the plane is moving, you feel like you're moving. But if that cloud is not there, there's no movement. So every day, as you're sitting here, from the time you arrived, your body has changed. You don't perceive that change now, you perceive it over time. But there's constant change. So what's the screen on which change is happening? What is that underlying law? So this is how this type of knowledge system works. It changes your cognition. You're constantly aware. Comparison. And when you say Nelson Mandela was like a lion, you don't mean he had fangs and a mane and that sort of thing. You're saying he had certain virtues, courage, was a stalwart, very objective, very humble, you see. So similarly, we use comparison in this stuff. And then tradition, very important. Like I found a teacher, by my assessment of him, his life, his understanding of things. It's not a blind faith in teachers. It's something that you understand that he's done himself. You arrogate your ignorance. You surrender it to him because he knows better. But it's not a blind following because I've seen what he's done in life. I've seen how nothing affects him. So this guy becomes a good teacher for me. And you put that into tradition in societies and cultures. So knowledge, first of all, this type of knowledge goes from the known to the unknown. You can't know the infinite, but you know the world. So how do we do it? We investigate the world and investigate the questions about the world, because the mind says, when I become an endocrinologist, I'll be happy. When I complete my reg time, my stress will stop. Is that so? Yeah? It's not so, right? Some of you might get married. Say, when I get married, I'll be happy. Biggest blunder you'll ever make, right? Give it 3 months, right? When I have children, I'll be happy. 1 child, 2 child. You got the nappies and you got the health issues and the snotty noses and the school fees you're going to have to pay because you want to put them in Rodin, not some Model C school, right? So my point is not wrong again. The point is that thing you're going to find, that contentment is not there. So this type of knowledge makes you question everything by negation. Is it there? No, it's not there. Doesn't mean you mustn't do it, but you set the right value for it. Christ says in one verse in the Bible, you got to lose this life to find this me. He who loses it for my sake shall find it. It doesn't mean you must leave the world and go sit in a cave and become a hermit. But we have this wrong value for things in the world. When I make 1 million, I'll be happy. When I make 10 million, I'll be happy. Yeah. Test that theory, negate it through your own experience. You'll see it doesn't work. Right. When I have a PhD, I'll be happy. Right. It doesn't happen. Test it, you'll see. So this type of knowledge takes you from what you know to negation, and it unveils what's underlying slowly. If something changes in you, you start feeling more content, more calm, right? Because it's just calmness what you are. But there is some theory to all of this. And when we study this philosophy, it gives you the composite human personality. You see, what we're very hooked to here is the body. Everything you're studying is just the body. In fact, one sage says, the body is nothing but reformulation of food. Nothing, right? And he says in the same verse, so is a mucus and excrement in your body, right? So the value we have for the body should be the same as mucus and excrement. That's it. Doesn't mean you mustn't take care of the body, but it's material, 60–70% water and then elements of it. So am I the body? The body, organs of perception, you receive sensory data from the world. There's a reaction in the mind. Mind is not body, according to philosophy. It's the thought center, all your past patterns, your likes and dislikes. If your granny gave you candy as a child to comfort you, as an adult, you're still dependent on that candy. You've developed a like. So when you don't get that thing, you're stressed, you see? So you don't realize that if the mind is not regulated there, right? We're constantly in a state of agitation and stress. But what sets humans apart beyond animals, see, animals up to mind, plants are just body, right? Mind can be regulated by the third equipment called intellect, which is not intelligence. Intelligence is book knowledge, gained from outer sources. Intellect is the ability, the faculty to monitor the mind. I like this sweet, but I have diabetes. Maybe it's not a suppression, it's a reasoning, it's a critical thinking. It's going to cause harm in terms of my value system. I need to work to earn money to get my kids through school. You know, there's a higher purpose to it. Intellect reasons things out. You'll drop that sweet, you see. So it's a very simple, basic example, but intellect at its highest level can navigate the world. So the gross intellect can monitor the mind, which is where the reactions of the sensory world are landing, and direct the mind like the banks of a river, direct the water to the ocean. Without those banks, it's a flood, you see. But then you have the subtle intellect, the contemplator. So the gross intellect monitors the duality of the world, tall and short, joy and sorrow, profit and loss, those sorts of things. But the subtle intellect contemplates the transcendental. There's a terrestrial world, what is that thing, that investigator? And at that level, the human's full, right? A human just at body level in scripture is called a mineral human, is a stone, you see. Now you start looking at this, it's not for us to sit here and judge others, but you can analyze in ourselves, you know, what part of me is mineral, stagnant, what part of me is just plant, you know, not moving. You see, animals can move further than plants. You can have a pool of water there and a plant here. Even during drought, it can't move there, right? Animals have further movement, but they're limited by their nature, migratory patterns, and all of that. But the human can move anywhere. The mind can move to any thought of something known. You could be sitting here, but thinking about a soap opera you watched last night or some new series, right? But the intellect can conceive of things unknown. That's the interesting thing. Just like Schrödinger conceived quantum physics, it's not known, you see? And that's the full human. This makes sense. Hope I'm not losing you, right? So lots of little offerings here in this talk. Each one of these slides is a talk on its own for weeks, actually. And I'm studying this stuff for 13 years, by the way, from 4 to 6 every morning, 7 days a week, right? So that's what it takes to get into the depth of this. So intellect versus intelligence, just a note on that. We are an intelligent species, no doubt. We must use information. But intelligence is gaining information. It's what AI is. It's what Google is. External sources. You become informed and knowledgeable. And often we use it as a utilitarian benefit, a means to make a living. Whereas intellect can help you plan and program your life, use available knowledge, faculty to think, reason. You don't accept anything which does not admit to logic and reason. And when you strengthen the intellect through constant thinking and questioning, not malicious questioning, you develop these faculties to see the world in a different light. So how do you develop the intellect? Question everything, never take anything at face value. As simple as that. If we don't use that intellect, the mind has sway, right? The devil has been personified in every scripture as the mind has been personified as the devil in every scripture, as the thing, the barrier between you and the infinite God, right? Shaitan, Satan, all of this. So what is the devil? The impulsive mind. I like this, I don't like that, do this, get there. When I get there, I'll be happy, isn't it? Christ says, get thee behind me, Satan, I'll have none by the hand. What is that? It's intellect reeling in the mind. You see, there's a logic to it. Of course, Christ spoke in a way that was receptive to the minds of those people at those times. Today, the same knowledge needs to be presented in a logical, scientific manner. It's intellect over mind, right? Because without monitoring of the mind, you lose sanity, become destructive, restless, turbulent, wrong choices, herd instinct. Everyone will become a reg, everyone will become a consultant. If the talk is all wrong, everyone will want a nice private practice somewhere. I'm not saying it's wrong. Just contemplate. You become the herd instinct, you're just following that. How come medical education is the same for everyone, but one rare guy will find a cure for a thing? That's the guy with intellect. You see, that's the difference here, right? Effect on religion and society, very important, and I'll mention that later because we're seeing it in the world. Militant, brutish behavior between groups. How come we have that in the world right now? There's no identification with people. In this country, we see it between groups. In the world, we're seeing it between religious groups, nations even. Why is that? There's no identification with the unifying principle within us. When you are body attached, there's an ego, there's a barrier. Nation attached, nationalism. You see, culture attached, boundaries. So everywhere we're going, we're creating boundaries. But the more we contemplate the unifying principle within, you see the one in all, universe, one in the variety. We've forgotten that, isn't it? That's the identification with everyone. So without intellect, there's a restless mind. As the intellect develops, you become more stable. Your life becomes calmer. Challenges come, you know how to handle it. You take a step back. And the perfect mind can handle anything. So I'm quickly going to fly through just how a lack of intellect may be relevant in medicine for now, right? Stress. Seems like the whole world is stressed. They talk about it in schools these days. I see kids that come with their parents to my practice, profit, especially the private schools, interestingly, right? They're all stressed. The guy in the X7 on Grayston Drive right now, BMW, with a nice suit and all the money, right? He's taking stuff to manage stress. But the guy pulling the recycling trolley with his friends on the highway and speeding along Grayston Drive on the down slope, he's smiling and laughing, right? You're not stressed. What's the difference? Ever thought about it? Huh? The guy down the slope, his desires are fulfilled for what he's doing. He has no desires beyond, no interruption of desires. He's in a bliss state. You see, the guy in the X7, he's thinking about the deadline, what his wife said that morning, and you know which holiday he's going to go on. His desires are not fulfilled. He's agitated. It's all in the mind. Stress is not an external thing, it's an internal thing. If we don't understand it correctly, we come up with all the wrong treatments, manage it, avoid it, put it to use, take a pill. You cannot fix stress with a pill, right? Stress has become nothing more than a socially acceptable form of mental illness. Everybody's stressed, and you acclimatize like that slow boiling toad. You know, the water warms up and he's fine. I'm fine. You ask anybody today, how are you? I'm fine, right? Let me get into that with you. I'll show you you're not fine, right? Because to be not stressed, you got to be in your original state. And this is why the Easterners used to, and Middle Easterners to some extent, used to observe nature. Chinese have beautiful poetry and literature about watching things. That's why you saw the opening slides had pictures of nature, right? When a rose is giving a fragrance, it's not in a stressed state. It's in and of itself. So when you take a 4-foot spring and you press it down to 1 foot, it's a state of stress. It's uncomfortable. There's pain on your hand. You can't exist like that. There's energy expenditure. But you release it a little more, there's less stress, a little more. When you come back to 4 feet, no stress, right? So what is no stress? By definition, it's when a thing is in its original state. So any human that's in stress means the human is not in his original state. Think about it. This is philosophy. This is how you talk in philosophy. So how do we get to our original state? You've got to understand that's the not original state. Stress is a mental agitation created by unfulfilled desires. Every day we are acquiring new desires. The work of life is to reduce desires, examine desires, and become objective. Have the right expectation. You see, the Buddha called the state of no desire nirvana. How many of you know that word, nirvana? Huh? And everybody says, I want nirvana. Standing like that's not going to do it. Nir means without. Vana means the fire of thought and desire. Human who reaches a state of no thought and desire reaches his original state. What the Muslims called nafs in the mind, these agitations, desires of Christianity. You see? So sin is nothing but mental agitations due to too many unfulfilled desires. You see? And then you also get stressed if you're selfish. It's the law. Think about it. Right? Any area in your life you're feeling agitated, there is a selfish thought there. You have thought, what can I get out of it? How does this affect me? The most unselfish people have been the greats of humanity. Look at Nelson Mandela. Look at Mahatma Gandhi. Right? Think of these people. Their nature turned charitable. They wanted nothing and they gave and forgave. You can never think of Nelson Mandela sitting there and coming to one of our clinics saying, hey, how about some Zeno there? Or, you know, right? Always just giving. And the highest who gave selflessly, we remember them thousands of years later, even when he was being crucified. I don't know what they're doing. I am connected with an infinite principle. The body, the mind does not matter. Forgive them. They know not what they do. Selflessness, right? So action doesn't have an ego. You plant it in the action. Maybe I'll make a quick example of a case that actually seen. Psychiatrist, I won't mention names, right? Came to see me and I could smell cigarette smoke on him, you know? I said, what's wrong, brother? He says, I'm stressed. And I said, no, this is a problem because you're helping everyone with stress and you're stressed yourself. I said, what's the issue? He says, I haven't seen 30 patients today and I haven't been seeing my numbers. I said, what do you mean 30 patients in a day? I can't get through 5 in a day, you know? He says, no, I need to get through this to meet my bills. You see? So there's a selfish intention there. He had just bought a bigger house. Why? This is not I'm not saying wives or bad husbands can be just as bad, but his wife wanted a bigger house, right? So he's attached to her. To please her, he bought a bigger house. Now it's in debt. So as much as on the outer part, the action is you helping patients, the inner intention is what can I get out of it? And when that desire is unfulfilled, you're stressed, you agitate. You see that? So we pollute action with the wrong attitude. This is interesting, but we think about it. So you don't get what you want in life if you work egotistically. This is the ego in us. I am the doer. I am all important. I only exist. We've got to call that out in ourselves as doctors, right? To the degree we reduce that in us, to that degree you become more beneficial to everyone, servants of humanity. And there have been studies to show this, selfless giving in medicine. Altruistic behaviors were infrequent among the sample of students studied, right? It's something I do with every TUT. The first TUT with students that I start, they all got sweaty armpits in the new tailor-cut scrub suits, right? No, what's wrong? No, doc, we got exams in 4 weeks. I said, you're starting the first day here and you're already stressed about exams. So the first TUT, I always go into a little bit of this. I said, listen, you're anxious because you're worried about your exam result, right? But rather than that, think about you developing this discipline and art to serve the people of this country, right? Think of that. And when you're in the exam, next to you is a patient that is suffering. Your job is to convey to the examiner what you've understood of that suffering and how you're going to help them. The minute you do that, then anxiety is gone. Where there's ego, there's anxiety. Where there's no ego, you'll pass, your mind will be calm, everything will be fine. And I think we also responsible partly for this, because there's a lot of talk with students and everyone, you must perform, you must get ahead. It's competition, it's endpoint, you know. What we should rather teach is cooperation, you know, service, think of the other. And I tell you that the demeanor of the students just changes the minute you mention that. It's a very interesting concept. But then you got to remind them at every time because they go back and speak to someone else, right? I don't want to spend too much time on this. I know Jared's given me an hour. Jared, I might just take up the full hour, right? But then you see, without intellect, you start seeing corruption in the pharmaceutical industry, right? All our research is influenced by corporate interests, money, right? I don't want to spend, like I said, too much time here, but the point is that we have to get involved. There's no independent science here. So without intellect, there's going to be corruption. And then look at this here. You guys are young. A lot of you are registrars. I see. You know, how far do you get involved with pharma industry teaching and stuff? I've been there and I've made my mistakes. But nowadays I know how far to go. I know how to call it out. I don't participate in things with any perverse incentive. If I have an opportunity to teach objectively and independently, I'll do it. But it's that tricky ego that just infiltrates everything. Ghostwriting. They'll appeal to your ego. We want you to be the speaker. You have to be very careful of this, you know. There's no independent science like Benting and Best who did insulin and then sold their work for $1. You don't see that anymore, right? Everything is about how much money it's going to make the shareholders. I have to call it out. We have to work with them. I'm not saying you must negate everything, but if you have your objective intellect, you will manage yourself within those spaces. And I think you have to be careful in this space. There's a commodification of medicine. And what does it entail? You see, money and commodification is for the body. It's not for the spirit. So everything gets commodified. There's a material approach. Another doctor came to see me, specialist in Adams Field. He said, I'm under stress. I need to buy a new machine. But he's buying it in debt. I said, but why are you buying the machine? To serve the patient need or to increase your income? And he just paused and he said, Bruder, you're right. I'm not going to buy it. And he didn't even answer the question, you know. I said, serve the need. When you have elbow room, got a little extra cash and you think it's going to help, get it. But standardize your life, just go with the flow. And then cosmetic versus real medicine. With no intellect, your body attached. So if I get this six-pack, if I have these lips, if I have those eyebrows, aesthetic medicine has just gone like this. I'm not saying it's all wrong. It can help certain people who have disfigurements and stuff. But there's a overvalue and attachment to it, in Houghton especially, apparently. Right? Right, they're all these vanity clinics. Not saying it's wrong. I'm saying I'm just talking as an objective analyst, as a philosopher. Nutraceuticals, huh? The rise of the nutraceuticals. No research. They have a context, maybe in Ayurvedic medicine in a certain time. People are selling this in their practices and making lots of money, but you got to convince people that you need it by creating fear. You must have curcumin for inflammation. You must have this. And then people walk around. This market is booming at the moment. Spoils your action, actually. This is one patient that came to me with all of these products. You see? Now, when did it become important for us to take so many products to maintain human homeostasis? It used to happen naturally. Close and wise relationship with the environment. That's what Claude Bernard said. He was the guy who coined the term homeostasis. Milieu interior, the internal milieu of the body. And he said, there's a delicate compensation with our interaction in the world. But the necessary axiom is close and wise relation with the world. Today, I put it to you that without intellect, we do not have a wise relationship with the world, which leads to the current maladies we see. So what we're trying to do is compensate with external physiological interventions. We're forgetting that internal program, see? And then with medical education, I know, Nina, I thought I would spend more time on this, but I just plant a seed, and this is a different talk on its own. Critical thinking, right? I don't think the current curriculum in the way it's designed is helpful to medical students. It doesn't inculcate critical thinking. It is fact heavy. There's a lot of data, modules, tick boxes. Learning should have a bit of a leisure to it. It should be artful. It should be enjoyable, like Da Vinci students coming to him for the sake of knowledge. And we should have less utilitarian ideologies to knowledge and education and more servile, servant-orientated. learn the art for the sake of the art. I think this is very important. And how we do that is through this type of discussion and talk more frequently, I think, amongst our spaces. Evidence-based medicine is excellent. I'm not dissing it, but there's a flip side to it, that if you become too heavily dependent on it without critical thinking, then you just depend on guidelines and algorithms, and that's not medicine. And you guys can Google this article and get some perspective on it, you know. How things are reported, the language we use creates perceptions. And without the intellect, you just become a herd conformist. You must have independent critical thinking. And this education in critical thinking doesn't start at medical school. It should start much earlier. And I think our country is in big trouble with our education system because this has completely been decimated in the last 10 to 15 years. There's no mathematics, there's no logic. There's logic theory is not being taught, you see. But there's a lot of history and fact-based sort of education, which creates emotional attachments and stuff. So your generations of students that are coming through into our faculties now, that capacity for critical thinking is lacking, independent thought. And it's something I think those that are in the field in academics must look into, you know. It's wonderful books by, forget his name, How to Read a Book it's called. I'll get you the name later. These are the books we should bring into our faculty in parallel to the current curriculum, so that those that want to take it up will take it up. William Osler, whom we've all studied when we were in Regis, those days, right? Professor Bloomson, Professor Tickley, all those legends of old used to quote these guys. And they used to say, this guy used to leave his house open when he wasn't around for his students so that his students could access his library. Professor Dubb has a section, I don't know if it's still there, in the medical school library when he passed on. When I was a registrar, I used to spend my time reading Professor Dubb's books in the library. And this is where all this journey started because he had a lot of philosophical books there, right? So end of the day, it's not new to us. We've lost this education of the heart of it, that intellect. And then ego in medicine. We have to be very careful. It seeps in there. It's a little thief, right? Nothing wrong with performing and achieving, but be careful we're not attached to the outcomes, right? Community hunger, power hunger, you know, fame hunger is a big one in medicine these days. You see doctors on social media today. I have just published, I am this, I am that, right? It taints our work. There's not a nice feeling to that, right? I can't imagine Professor Bloomson, late Professor Bloomson, being on social media and say, hey, I did this, I did that. Quietly just gave his 10 Rand, wrote his notes, taught us something and carried on with his work. That's the beauty of real doctoring, right? And Shakespeare knew it. When the intellect goes, judgment goes, fled to brutish beasts, men have lost their reason. Every Shakespearean play starts off with everyone looking smart and royalty and nice outfits. And every Shakespearean play is about one wrong emotion in the mind, unregulated by the intellect, and it ends with blood and guts. That's Shakespeare for you, right? A smart guy. He just didn't have the knowledge on how to solve the problem. So in the final part of the talk, we started about 5 minutes late. Is that okay? Right. What are the solutions? So this is why I found philosophy useful. You see, in Sanskrit, they call life a series of experiences, anubhava dharana. And every experience is a meeting of you, the subject, and the object, the world. The world outside of you is under the influence of those laws. It will carry on by its own vicissitudes. You cannot control it. But you, the subject, the human being made up of a body, a mind, and an intellect, right, can improve yourself. You see, if the experience of life is becoming poorer, but the objective world is improved in science and technology, then in the equation, the thing that remains unrehabilitated is the subject, the human, you see. So the work to do is self-work. It's not fix the world, fix yourself. And the work to do then is to understand how the mind and this intellect work. Vasana is a concept that will take me 2 weeks to explain, but each one of us is born with a particular fragrance. For those of you that have more than one child, same genetics, hopefully, same house, right? Same food, all of that. But within 2 weeks of birth, you can see you've had 3 children and you look at the history, they have a particular inclination. There's a fragrance to them. That fragrance designs your thought patterns for life. The problem is they acquire a lot of wrong patterns on top of that, you see. So if you understand that that's how action occurs in the world, you're desired to hear something, so your body brought you here. But the desire is in the mind, the thought is in the mind. So without thought, there can be no action. So the work to do is not on action, is on the thoughts. And then you use the intellect to cultivate better thoughts, you see, or reduce unnecessary thoughts. Because otherwise you're a slave to these three transactions. You receive the world, you hear something, there's a reaction in your mind based on your past patterns. And if the intellect doesn't monitor that, your responses in the world through your limbs and your tongue are impulsive. Someone said something, you swear them. Someone says something, you punch them. Someone says something, will send some atom bombs towards you. You see, individually, collectively. So all I'm highlighting, I think the crux of this entire talk is, yes, there's an underlying law that we need to contemplate, but getting there requires development of this intellect, which is philosophy ultimately. You have to understand that your thoughts and desires can be selfish, unselfish. The ultimate state, that Christ state, that Buddha state, that Krishna state, that Mahomed state, is a selfless state. The only way I can describe that state is a nightingale sits on a tree and sings a song. The human sitting under the tree says, "Oh, beautiful song." Now, did the nightingale sing the song for the compliment? No. Did it sing the song to entertain the human? No. It does what is in and of itself, natural. A human in the most natural state, ultimate human, is that selfless being. No prefixes, no suffixes, no motives. That's the ultimate. So unselfish, of course, higher than selfish, but the work to do is merge into that selflessness. Don't add motives to work. There are mental temperaments which the Vedas teach, and I've not seen this in any other text. Every human being is a proportion of these type of thoughts, you see, and the dominant thought form determines your dominant personality. And most humans are in this frenzy and inertia today. The higher thoughts develop not through forcing them, but by developing the intellect and unveiling the law within you. It's a very interesting state. Sattva means truth, the serene human, the calm human. So the more you do the self-work, automatically this develops in you. But for those that are here, it's not wrong. There are prescriptions by analyzing your mind. If you're a passionate, frenzied person, you can't tell that person to sit and meditate. They can't. That person must go do what they call karma yoga. He must do action in the community, but instead of selfish gain, you should do it with service orientation to calm the mind. The lethargic person needs a lot of devotion. You must try and infuse feelings in them, you know, classical music, something to invoke them to some movement, and then you know, gravitate towards the higher. If you understand these things, you understand human behavior. You don't stand in judgment of things, but you also start understanding lifestyle medicine. And then the fundamental values you've got to contemplate in the mind, right? I've covered action, but what about direction? Are you moving in all directions? I want to be a cardiologist, but I want to have 4 children, and I want to be a disruptor and a social media entrepreneur and an influencer. There's no direction there, you know. Decide what is in your vasana set, your initial nature, and work in one direction, you'll be more effective, you see. Objectivity, to see things as they are, not as you like them. Things are as that. Summer's going to be warm, winter's going to be cold. You want winter to be warm, you're going to be stressed. Right, adapt, be objective. Duty is not right, a big topic in the world today. You have a right to what you like, but you have a duty to compromise your likes for higher purpose. You can be free in a country, but you've got to stop at a red traffic light. Otherwise, things don't work. It's an important concept to contemplate. Giving, not taking. Doesn't mean you must go give away everything within your means, but having that attitude of you first. Walking, the taxi coming behind you in the high speed, you don't say, "Look at this fool." You say, "Please, sir, go ahead." That's his nature. You first. Everything will work just well, right? And gratitude, not this fake thank you, thank you, thank you. Nothing you do is possible today without so many people having come together for you to thrive. The sun came up this morning, the trees are giving oxygen, teachers before you have done hard work and research to convey knowledge, right? So this ego comes down through a feeling of gratitude, that contemplation every day. You say a chant in the morning, "Thank you, sun, for rising." You say a chant in the evening, "Thank you for going down as well, because otherwise we finished." isn't it? The precision of those laws. And as you develop this, you go beyond yourself. Almost done. You move beyond the boundary of your selfish self, me, my, I. Your family becomes important. The charity begins at home, should not end there, right? Those that identify further become community men, start doing charity work. They start getting involved in policies and that sort of thing. The higher human is a countryman, the Mandelas and the Gandhis and that sort of thing, right? But the full human identifies with every living creature. It's cosmos, not chaos, you see? And that's where we reach our full potential, right? And how do we do that? Intellectual development. Intellect conceives of a mature state of existence and directs one in its achievement. Take nothing for granted and question everything. My final 2 slides. Prayer is not going to a church or mosque or a temple and saying some chants. Prayer is a constant awareness of the divinity that shapes our ends. Wherever you are, you could be praying right now. The word religion comes from 2 Latin roots. Re means again. Legion comes from ligand, ligare, to bind, to join. So religion means reunion, rejoin. Lost something, you want to rejoin. It is the modern Western word for the Sanskrit word yoga, to yoke, to join. Everywhere there's this illusion that we're all trying to join, to bind with something, you see? And this unveiling of that underlying principle is the yoking to that eternal principle. If we talk about it this way, we cannot have disputes amongst religions, because the goal of every religion is one and the same. What we have developed is a fanatic attachment to some boundary or personality or ideology. But the unifying ideology is not compromisable. And this is something that Ibn Sina, his books are in the University of Edinburgh's Medical School in Arabic. I had the opportunity to, I can't read Arabic, but just look at it. It was very fascinating. Okay, and these guys were there, Socrates, Aristotle, right? Plato is pointing up to the transcendental, Aristotle is saying terrestrial. See, his hand is down there, right? There's all the great thinkers. This painting is called the School of Athens. Read about it. It was always there in recent Greek philosophy as well. An idea of a transcendental purpose beyond the terrestrial undertakings. If you look at it like this, attached to body, there's separation, infinite beings, right? But as you get to mind, there's a commonality in what we feel. Intellect, in all of us, if it's developed, is one and the same. So the unifying principle is that infinity within. And that's how we got to think about it. This is called the Kosha wheel, the depiction of humans, right? And it's actually a contradiction, because you cannot limit infinite into finite. But the outer sheath is our food sheath. The physiology is vital air, breathing, circulation, digestion, everything that we study. But it's the mental turbulence that regulates the physiology that gives you the end effect. And the intellect is powerful, it manages the mind, physical health will be fine. But at the end of the day, it's getting to that bliss sheath, that infinite within. That's the goal of life ultimately. So you've got to go from the gross to the subtle. You've got to contemplate some of these truths. We've got to go beyond knowledge into wisdom, which is practice, subjective, it's insight. You become intuitive. You just know what to do within a certain situation, you see? And this develops through the mechanisms I have told you. Because if we want to get to ultimate nature, we must take our measure, our yardstick, not in the world, but from that central principle in man. And this is my final slide. I contemplated this since high school. You all know the Vitruvian Man, right? And when I read about it, there was all limited theories about what it means. The geometry, the symmetry, the beauty of the human body. But it only hit me about 2 years ago through my studies. The square is a limited 4-angle structure. Limiting means the body. The body is the limitation. If I add more angles to the square, it becomes a hexagon. If you add more angles, it becomes a polygon. If I add an infinite number of angles to a square, it becomes a circle. Circles have always been a depiction of infinity. And I think that's what Leonardo saw. They use art to convey the subtle, abstract, abstruse thoughts and ideas. That the human is at that pinnacle of evolution, and the future evolution of human is not at the physical level. It's supramental. It's transcendental. that infinite principle within this limited structure. So I hope this talk has done what I intended for it to do, that if we are lost, we're going to find it within, that kingdom of heaven within. And for those of you that are interested, happy to chat to you afterwards and how you can pursue more of this in conjunction with your career. Others may just feel like this. Thank you very much.